Hey guys, Loman02. I'm currently doing a quick series, and kind of what inspired me to do this is some folks had questions about a couple of the cards that we unbanned recently for the 100 card singleton format in the Chainsaw Massacre. One of them was Necropotence, and I wanted to show this set of games, these two sets of games right here. Well, specific games inside two matches that will hopefully open up here momentarily as Moto tries very hard to open it. So we're playing. I say we Loman02. We're playing a red deck wins variant versus Johnny Rogue, who's playing what appears to be a mono black deck that runs Necropotence. So we see Curse Scroll on top. It's a recurring source of damage, which I tend to think in this matchup is going to be good. And artifacts are tough for black to beat or to kill. So I kind of like it. We get Thoughtseized here. We lose our Abbot, which is a card advantage card. We have another one on top, though, that we know about. We play the 1/1 out because Suicide Black or Necropotence decks tend to be hard on their life totals. So I'm fine not having the assured mana for the following turn, casting on a 1/1 there. We see a Vampire Hex Mage pull an Arc Trail, which is very fortuitous because it allows us to kill both of his threats and keep the board clear. He plays out Necropotence and domes himself for a significant amount of damage, going back up to 7 cards in hand. We play out a Hellspark Elemental. He blocks here, which I think is smart because he's essentially saving himself 2 cards because he can't draw anymore. Necropotence obviously stops your draw step. We get him to Turret and lose our 2 remaining cards that were frankly uncastable at that point. We draw up to 3 lands. He destroys our land because Cursed Scroll is a legitimate threat now. We draw a 4-drop, can't cast it. He plays on a Vampire Nighthawk, which is a good pull for him off the Potence because he needs to gain life to continue to draw cards. Otherwise, he's Necro-locked. Necro-locked is when you are basically 1 life, cannot gain life, and have Necropotence in play. It means you never draw a card again. That is one of the costs of the card. It's a pretty low cost, but I guess what I really want to get after with this, we eventually end up mising. We hit our 3rd land here. He knows that he can't draw any longer, or he can't draw anymore because Curse Scroll is lethal with any card draw here. You can't use Curse Scroll without a card in hand because you have to name something and actually have something in your hand. We end up drawing Flame Rift and we get him. So the reason I'm showing this one, I mean, it's not because we won, but I kind of wanted to. I'm going to show another one that Necropotence actually wins in. So Necropotence is one of those cards. It was extremely underrated when it first came into play, or when it first was presented by Wizards of the Coast in Ice Age. And I don't even know if they owned it at that point. I think they just had owned it at that point, or bought Magic the Gathering from Richard Garfield. Necropotence was highly underrated. The idea of exchanging one resource, life, for another cards was something that hadn't really been explored yet. And initially, folks thought the card was kind of a garbage rare, and it ended up being an extremely powerful card, extremely busted. Um, One of the challenges you run into with building Necropotence-based decks is that you one need to have cards that are efficient enough to continue to cast them at a rate at which your hand is depleted so you can regain cards from it, because you can't keep more than 7 cards in your hand, and if you discard them they get exiled, so it's not like it works in a reanimator style strategy. So what it tends to be played in, or what it initially was played in, was like a beatdown style deck, kind of like what you see he has here. He has a little more disruption, and some bigger mana cards like Hangerback Walker and Vampire Nighthawk. Vampire Nighthawk makes sense to me though because it's a card that gains you life, which is going to be relevant when you're playing a deck that has Necropotence in it. But he also has some weenies. You know, we saw like well, you didn't see, but in the game one he had like the Gravecaller type cards in there as well. So just very efficient cards. So you need to play generally a low curve deck that can one put the opponent under very rapid pressure, can deplete its hand rapidly to gain advantage on board, and then can keep the opponent tied up with the board while they're continuing to draw cards and not lose life. Where a deck like Necropotence runs into issues, or where Mono Black in general runs into issues, is a deck like this red one we're playing. We've seen quite a few less cards than our opponent has at this point, but because our cards are capable of doing direct damage and we're capable of racing at a higher rate than Black generally tends to be, we're in a good place. Because I mean, here any draw made the game state such that you needed 2 turns of attacking with Vampire Nighthawk to draw any cards. Um, because any draw with Curse Scroll is 2 damage. which is tough because so essentially, the effects of the Vampire Nighthawk could have been mitigated anyways, and he would have just been locked on 3 cards in hand because of Cursed Scroll. So when you look at this game, even though he was able to draw more cards than we were, Necropotence has its downsides too, and it's not an end all be all of any game. So the one challenge that you have building a Necropotence deck in 100 card singleton is that one, your capability to gain life in black with drain life effects, and or lifelink creatures is a little more limited. You have Tainted Aetherborn now, you have Vampire Nighthawk. He played Wormcoil Engine off of the Lake of the Dead in the first game, so that there are cards that do it. The other piece to it is that you don't have those duplicates, right? And the other piece is I kind of got sidetracked there, is that you don't have a repeatable sweeper effect for enchantments, artifacts, creatures, like basically other permanent types, because black just doesn't do that. So back in the day, Necropotence was actually an interesting deck because it tended to run some number 2 to 4 Nevin Jarl's Disc, which to get that effect in black, you have to go to colorless. And there's not a lot of cards that are in colorless that are like Nevin Jarl's Disc that don't have a bad effect on the game. And Nevin Jarl's Disc could be used to break Necropotence Lock if you were drained. If you're drained out of life and you had to go back to drawing, it could destroy problem permanents like enchantments, so that you could get back after the game. The other piece is, though, I mean, you need to have a significant number of gain life effects, and really the Necropotence deck back in the day, back when it first started getting broken, and there was like Necro Winter, ran off Dark Ritual, right? Dark Ritual, Cabal Ritual, Ritual effects, because those cards are perfect for the first thing I was kind of talking about in regards to Necropotence, which is you want to be able to dump your hand rapidly to rebuild it. Now, if you're using like 3 Dark Rituals or 2 Dark Rituals or Cabal Ritual, Dark Ritual, and you're casting a Drain Life, you've just depleted, 2 to 3 cards out of your hand. Maybe you cast a Black Knight or another threat. While you're doing that, you gain 3 life off your Drain Life, and you're down 3 cards. Your card economy is very poor, but you've gained 3 life, and you basically, whenever you gain life, you're drawing that many cards back in. Do I think it's too good? No, I think it dies to a lot of things. I think very aggressive strategies. So black's in a weird place. Like if you play mono black, it's in a weird place. I think its creatures are worse than White's creatures. White's creatures are just better. Like White has the best weenie creatures. I mean, they have First Strike, they have cool effects on them. They're better in combat than Red or Black's creatures. Um, and the weird thing is that for Black or for Red, their creatures are generally more efficient. But they're generally about the same quality Blacks are. Um, but the reason that I think they're a little better is because they generally tend to be more efficient than Black's creatures. Now, I mean, you can find good efficient Black threats, but the problem you run into is the ramp in black that you had when you had a 60 card deck that had 4 Dark Rituals or some number of Cabal Rituals, etc. And 4 gain lives or drain life. I'm sorry, not gain life, but drain life. In those effects, or the other one was Spinning Darkness, which was exile the top 2 black cards of your library. Don't have to pay a mana cost for it, and do 3 damage to target creature and gain 3 life. That was another card that was very common. So pitch cards like Contagion are very good in Necropotence, because you can pitch a card and go down 2 cards and then draw 2 and remove 2 relevant threats from the opponent. I think that's a great card in the Necropotence deck. But where it runs into issues is it's low end in the stuff you can cast off of Necropotence in a very timely manner to deplete your hand and regain cards are generally just not going to be as good as the other aggressive strategies in the format. Those generally just tend to get outpaced. So that was this match. We ended up, I think, going 2-1 in it. The first game against Red Deck Wins, he had a turn 3 off of Lake of the Dead Wormcoil Engine, which was unbeatable. So this last game right here, so I'm gonna play game number 2 of this match. Michelle Wong here is playing a mono black control list. I'm playing a Suicide Black or Necropotence deck. Basically black aggro. So this is the opener. And there's some banter in the side here. I tell her like this is probably a bad hand, but I'm gonna keep it because it just takes me back to the old days. So this is probably the nut draw for this deck, this style of deck. I've drawn the Dark Ritual. I have 1 single swamp, Dark Ritual, and Necropotence. She's on the play. Obviously, being on the play would have been better, but my plan is like, hey, I'm just gonna go for it. Like, I haven't gotten to do this in a long time. Like, this hasn't been that great in a long time. I'm gonna go for the Dark Ritual Necropotence and then just start dumping these crappy little threats and use the removal I've got to remove her threats and probably end the game at a very low life total and hopefully win. So we play out the swamp. We go for the Dark Ritual Necropotence. Draw three. I'm sorry, exiling one. Michelle laughs. She plays out Charcoal Diamond. She's more of a controlling deck than we are. We draw back up to 7. You'll see us draw to 7 every turn. She plays a Liliana, finds a swamp. We kill her Liliana. I believe blow up one of her lands to slow her down some and play out the Gnarled Scarhide. I could have seen playing out the Glincy or Sleeve Siphoner, but I really don't need to be drawing more cards at this point. And because of how that card works, and because I don't want to play Bob either, because Bob could just kill us here, even though it's a great card. So this deck runs a lot of different engine cards like Glint Sleeve Siphoner, Bob, Necropotence, whatever the 3-mana enchantment version of Bob is. We have Phyrexian Arena. She cast a Mind Shatter, discard some of our cards, which, we don't really need to replace at this point because we just have such an aggressive start. And, this is a turn 1 Necropotence, and no, I mean, it's a turn 6 win, with frankly very limited interaction from our opponent. So, even though we won with a turn 1 Necropotence, it's not like we're on red deck wins where like we can kill by turn 4. We still just won this game by turn 6, and we played either a creature or multiple creatures every single turn of the game and disrupted her. So this is turn 6. We're going for lethal. So it's not that fast. So that said, like I kind of wanted to show, I don't think Necropotence is a bad card for the format. I think it's fine. It's not that fast. Like, it's not as fast as you think it is. Um, and I frankly don't think it's that busted. Like it's a very. I'm sorry. Like Necropotence is a busted card, but in order to really break it, you need to have big mana every turn, i.e. Dark Rituals and Cabal Rituals, like almost every turn, or you need to be playing Storm, and even now, like, Necropotence is in a place where, like, no one really wants to play it in Storm because you don't draw them instantaneously, you draw them at the end step, which means you basically have to take a bunch of damage in a game that can, end, on the just a single turn by the opponent, and, it's not as powerful as like Yawgmoth's Bargain, which is typically used now in Vintage Storm. That or Paradoxical Outcome. So this is kind of how we figured out Potence. A couple cards that you could look at using to break the card, not break it, but to make it significantly better than probably how my deck's set up are a few right here. So I think this card right here, Spinning Darkness, and let me pull up the display window right now so you can kind of see some of the cards that used to be used with this card. Spinning Darkness is essentially a pitch card. You can exile the top 3. I'm sorry, when I described it before, it was 2. It's 3 cards of your graveyard rather than paying the cost. Does 3 damage to a non-black creature, and you gain 3 life. Gaining 3 life when you're on an active Potence and removing one of their threats is a great exchange rate, especially when it costs no mana, and then you just have to, exile some junky cards from your graveyard. Couple other cards that were played historically in it. Well, not historically, but could be played in it to similar effect. I believe it is Soul Spike is the name of the card. That's a card that could be used as well. Yeah, I do have one. And here, let me pull this one up. This is also a pitch card. Nope, if we can get the preview window up. Nope. Bear with me, folks. Soul Spike is also a very relevant card for a Necropotence deck. You can exile 2 black cards from your hand rather than pay Soul Spike's mana cost. It does 4 damage to our creature or player, and you gain 4 life. So this is a great effect for this style of deck as well. Obviously, you're never going to want to hardcast this thing. And it's kind of a little clunky because if you're not on an active Potence draw where you can just like replace cards very rapidly, this card's kind of bad. But the card itself is good. It's an old Cold Snap card. There's obviously like, your exsanguinates of the world right here, where it's just another drain life. You drain them, or just old school drain life. But the problem ends up being, and here you go, just that's essence drain. I'm sorry, drain life right here. Spend black mana, drain them, you gain the life. Which are all viable, but realistically, the way I think you're gonna best utilize the card, and it's not even really gonna be broken then, is by just by playing, small aggressive critters that can close the game out quick. Generally are going to be of substandard quality to your opponent's critters. This is the card I was thinking right here. Gifted Aetherborn. generally going to be of some substandard quality to your opponent's cards, but you beat them by just drawing more of these cards that are of slightly lesser value than your opponent's individual cards. But I still don't think it's a sure strategy to winning the game. I don't think Necropotence is per se broken. I think, unless you're able to somehow, figure out a way to get, numerous mana, or generate large amounts of mana, which, the only ones that really come to mind in black are going to be like Culling the Weak is a card that can do it. This generates 4 mana, but you have to sacrifice a creature. Dark Ritual, which you saw in that matchup. Cabal Ritual, which is, also a high quality card. It's a high quality mana card, but you only have like one in your deck, and this is create 3 or create 5 if you have Threshold. And then the other one that comes to mind in black. Oop, that's not going to work. Lake of the Dead is Lake of the Dead. It's a very fast mana engine. Now, you could state that, there's cards like Crypt Gas that do that. That's a 4-drop, and, on this deck, you ideally want to be fast out of the gates. So this is just a quick series to kind of explain, what I think Necropotence does to the format, and frankly, I don't think it does all that much to the format whatsoever. I think it's a great card, and it's very powerful in, some of the throwback standard, matches, stuff like that. But I just don't think it's fast enough for the new creature cards that have been printed. And I think the quality of, low end beatdown black cards, which I think is where you want to be when you're on Necropotence, because I don't think Necropotence Storm is viable in 100 card. I think Necropotence is a card that will kill you more often than it'll save you in Storm. I think you just want to utilize your graveyard through not Burning Wish, Past in Flames, um, to win that matchup. So I don't know. I think it's an interesting card for sure, and I think if you're going to run mono black aggro, you run it because it is powerful in that deck. But it also comes at a steep cost, and I can see you boarding it out a significant amount of the time because against aggressive decks like this white one you see in front of you, or against like a red deck wins, it's just not that good. Like resolving it is like, okay, cool, man. You've got like 3 2-1s or whatever, but I'm just gonna burn you a couple times because you've done like 10 plus damage to yourself. Like it takes me like 3 cards to do that. So I think it's in a more contested place than you would think just looking at it. It is extremely powerful, and if you've played the game for many years, or you played when Necropotence was first printed, and you remember the Necro Winter of yore, then you may have some painful memories of the card. But I think in 100 card, it's just not as good as it would initially make you think it is. It is good, but it's not a game ender by any means. Against certain decks, it may be, but you have to also understand there's a significant amount of risk that comes to playing that style of strategy. One, the individual cards are just not that great. Like they're just kind of meh, you know. The critters are just suboptimal when you compare them to cards like Thalia, Guardian of Thraben, or even like Mother of Runes, or I mean heck, even Student of Warfare is like a better 1-drop than like most of the ones you're gonna find in that deck. Kithian, Gideon's Lawkeeper, Ismaru. Um, they're just better, and I don't know. Maybe I'm looking at it wrong, but I think they tend to be of a slightly higher quality. Anyways, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this quick video, kind of explaining my take on Necropotence. I already kind of did one. I wrote some text on how I see Mana Drain being positioned in the format. And I think I've exhaustively talked about Loam, Life in the Loam, what it can do to game states, what it's good against, what it's actually not that great against, how you beat it, etc. And I hope this kind of helps give you some creative ideas. Maybe I am completely wrong, and Necropotence can be just the most busted thing you can possibly do in 100 card, but I don't think so. Again, I frankly think that of the cards we unbanned, Loam and Fastbond probably take that place. I think they're probably the two most broken cards. Followed thereafter probably by Mystical Tutor. I think the rest are like, frankly, they should be in the format. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this short series, and I hope it was informational and hopefully helpful. Take care now.